I'm a paper and pencil kind of person. I often have a notebook at hand, a pencil, and I love getting my ideas that are in my head onto a piece of paper. And a few months ago, we actually moved to this apartment. And after the sale of our other one, I knew we were coming here. And I sort of worked out the dimensions, and I wanted to see if, does our furniture fit? Does it work in that space? What needs to happen? Really think through and not just assume that I could just transport the furniture from one apartment to the next and it's just going to fit. We have to actually think through and play with and strategize and work out how it's going to work there. And it's the same with our learning environments. We might see something that's amazing in a photograph somewhere, but we have to think about it in terms of our environment, especially what I was talking about before, not just going from why to what, but really thinking about how something's going to work. We are living in particularly complex times, and just returning to this image, it really is a reflection of past times. And you know, we crossed over to the 21st century and we thought we were in a period of exponential change, but the last 2 years have really amplified change in our world, and that's confronting for many of us. For people like me, I'm an early adopter to change, and I am able to sort of take risks and roll with things, but not everybody's like that. And it's been very challenging for many people. And I stumbled across this article in the Atlantic. And this article is, the pandemic broke a fundamental principle of teaching. Got my curiosity going. So I wanted to understand what that was. And as I read the article, a few quotes leapt out at me. They were talking to teachers and quoting teachers. I'm trying to prepare a million different options. Nobody really knows what to expect. It's impossible to plan. Lesson plans we've relied on for years or decades will no longer work for our students. And no matter what subject we teach, teachers must collaborate as never before. And there was a real revelation amongst these teachers that they were entering like a new era of the world. So part of me goes, well, that's, in a way, it's great that the pandemic has heightened the need that lesson plans and ideas that are decades, potentially decades old, no longer fit in today's world. And that's why we need to bring a new mindset to the way we think about problem solving in complexity. And this is the focus of my thesis. My underpinning theoretical foundation is complexity theory. And what it's basically saying is that we have to navigate many variables, many potential outcomes, many options that might be worth pursuing. It's no one size fits all, and there's no cause effect pathway that we can tread. So that brought me to a way of thinking around, how do we problem solve in complexity? And these 4 images here explain it. I'm drawing on something called the kind of a knowledge framework, which is a way of unpacking the types of problems we might face. So at the top 2, we've got a recipe and we've got a watchmaker. For both of those, it's a finite process. If we follow a recipe, generally, we can reach the desired outcome of the food that we're preparing. A watchmaker with technical expertise can take apart this complicated timepiece, repair, replace, and put it back together again. So in both of those, we call the recipe a simple problem. We call the watch a complicated problem. There are known outcomes, and we can confidently make progress toward achieving our goal. In the bottom left, you can see there's a game of pin the tail on the donkey happening here. And this is called chaotic problem solving. This is when we're in a situation where there are too many unknowns. If you're thinking about that game, you've got a pin and you've got a rump of a donkey, you've got to put the pin on the tail, but you've got a blindfold on and you're spun around. There is no way that you can do anything but literally stab in the dark. You're guessing. And there are times in the pandemic, I think, that we've felt this way. We've felt like we're guessing, but we actually need to not stay in this world. But that's where on the bottom right, we've got the complex problem, applying complexity theory. And I relate this to raising children. So when we've got, my husband and I've got two adult sons, and they've turned out okay, quite nice humans. But when, you know, with the mix of parenting, you have no idea how that's going to pan out. And you feel like it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but you draw on your expertise, you find people who know things, you look for examples, read books, all of those things, bring it together and make progress toward your goal. That's what navigating change in complex environments are like. And that's what I'm hoping those teachers in those articles might realize, that the simple and complicated ways of solving problems in the past, they don't apply now. We have to come with a fresh mindset towards how we're going to solve complex problems that we're facing now. So with a recipe, we just follow it. With the watchmaking, we get an expert in. If it's a technical problem, we get the techie in. Let's not even think about chaotic. But if we are facing complex problems, we bring a design mindset to them. And there are many ways that this is explained, but I'm not going to go into this in great detail now. But you start with a real understanding of the user. And in the school, it's the student and the teacher, they're the users. We define the problems, and then we ideate solutions and create prototypes. And this is where it's a bit different for, you know, many educators are embracing this, but many find it hard because are we experimenting with our kids? Will our kids be okay? But we need to, it's the only way of making progress, I believe, in complex environments is by following a design type process and being comfortable with taking risks. When in my research for my thesis, I looked at schools where there was an innovative learning environment, the teachers were working in teams, and the principal deemed them to be relatively successful. Every team of teacher that I spoke to in this study, somebody in that team said, you know what, there's no rule book, or it's just trial and error and we've got to work it out. And that's what they did. So I'm just going to show you some of the schools that I've visited around the world. And this just some, I guess it's nice to have a glimpse into the life of other schools. And this is welcoming you into a school, but it's a beautiful entrance to this school in England. But there are schools, and particularly in Scandinavia, where there's this sense of school feels like home. Let me show you. There are flowers and lit candles on the table. There's a lamp and a working nook, that students working in that corner, creating that environment where what's the type of space I need to be in to do the work that I'm doing, and students are able to make those choices. Some have kitchens and the students work around a kitchen bench, and others it's like the dining table and there's light filled, and it doesn't feel like a classroom. And I think that's where we're coming to today, is that we're putting more emphasis on the aesthetic and the ambience that the environment for learning needs to be successful. This one's got a little reading nook that's a combi, and then there's different ways that students are being arranged in the classroom, and you can even see levels here, or there's students on the floor, that kind of thing. Different ways that you can create those students working in that room. They're not actually separated, but that framing just creates a little bit of separation from the other students in the space. So if we go back and think about our W. Fisher topologies again, and the types of teaching and learning that might occur in the space, when we can think about it, when we translate that thinking into the physical environment, we can think of this in terms of zones, learning zones. So we can name those learning zones. And this is another part of my research that came out, that teachers were using the same language to describe the spaces in their learning environment, but also the activity that goes on in those spaces. So a teacher might say that, you know, I'm going to do a presentation lesson, I need to do this, and there's a sense of negotiation, but also as they're negotiating, they're using the same terminology that everybody understands. Another way of looking at it, I'm sure you've used this yourself, is cave, campfire, watering hole. And that's developed by David Thornburg. And the work I did I had a colleagues and I worked on a product called Design Engage, which is a design thinking activity. We talked about empty space, outside space, and maker space. And then we can overlay that on some of the spaces. You can see there that there's some watering holes, and there's a campfire, and there's that student sitting in the corner was a cave, and those students collaborating at a watering hole. So we can just use that terminology to help us to understand how we're going to utilize our space. So what we're going to do in this final discussion together is think about co-creating the learning environment. Looking at all the things that we've talked about in these sessions. Why does this matter to the students? How will we, the teachers, work together? How will we organize the learning environment? What needs to be in the learning space and what doesn't? And see if we can apply some of these principles, and to see that the co-creating the learning environment is like the garden. We're doing it now, but you're the gardeners, and the garden will always need tending, and the garden will be at the whims of the sun and the rain. And it gets back to being, it's a complex organic environment, just like our learning environments.